The Green Beret, Story, Part 1. The rain hammered against the cracked windows of the abandoned warehouse on Kepler 7, each drop carrying the metallic taste of alien pollution. Marcus Chen pulled his worn jacket tighter as he watched two small figures approach through the gloom. The boys couldn't be more than 12 and 10 years old, their clothes patched and dirty, their eyes holding the kind of hardness that came from seeing too much death. "You the Green Beret?" the older boy asked, his voice steady despite his trembling hands. Marcus studied them carefully. In his 43 years, 25 of them spent in Earth's Special Forces. He'd learned to read people quickly. These kids weren't playing games. The younger boy clutched something wrapped in cloth against his chest, and both carried the smell of smoke and fear. "Depends who's asking," Marcus replied, not moving from his position against the wall. The warehouse had been his home for 6 months now, ever since he'd been discharged from the military. The Galactic Council had declared human military units unnecessarily aggressive after the Rigel incident, and veterans like Marcus found themselves unwelcome on most civilized worlds. "Our father," the older boy started, then stopped, swallowing hard. "The Galactic Soldiers killed our father." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Galactic Soldiers were the Council's peacekeeping force, made up of various alien species who supposedly maintained order across the galaxy. Officially, they were heroes. Unofficially, Marcus had seen their work up close during his military service. "That's a serious accusation, kid," Marcus said softly. "The Galactic Soldiers are supposed to protect civilians." The younger boy stepped forward, unwrapping the cloth bundle. Inside was a small recording device, its surface scratched and partially melted. "We got proof," he whispered. "Papa always said if something happened to him, we should find a human soldier. He said humans were the only ones who still remembered how to fight for what's right." Marcus took the device, his fingers recognizing the military-grade construction. This wasn't some civilian toy. "What's your names?" "I'm Tommy," the older boy said. "This is my brother Jake. Our last name was Richardson, but Papa changed it to Chen Ka after Mama died. He said human names were safer, Richardson." Marcus remembered that name from the service records. David Richardson had been a supply sergeant during the Centauri campaign. Good man with a wife and 2 kids. The record said he'd died in a transport accident, but Marcus had always suspected there was more to it. "Your father was a soldier," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. Tommy nodded. He never talked about it much, but sometimes at night he'd tell us stories about Earth, about how humans used to explore the stars before the Council took over. He said humans were different from the other species, that we had something called courage that scared the aliens. Marcus activated the recording device. The hologram that appeared showed a man in his late 30s, thin and weathered, speaking in hurried whispers. "If you're watching this, I'm probably dead. My name is David Richardson, former Sergeant, Earth Military Forces. I've been gathering evidence about Galactic Soldier activities on the outer colonies. They're not peacekeepers. They're occupiers." The image flickered as David held up data chips. "I've documented 17 incidents where Galactic Soldiers executed human civilians for seditious activity. The activity in question was usually teaching human children about Earth history or refusing to submit to genetic modification procedures. The Council wants to eliminate human independence, but they're doing it slowly, quietly." A sound in the background made David look up sharply. "They're here. Tommy, Jake, if something happens to me, find Marcus Chen. He's on Kepler 7, lives in the warehouse district. Tell him about Operation Starfall. Tell him the countdown has started." The recording cut off abruptly. Marcus stared at the empty air where the hologram had been, his mind racing. Operation Starfall had been classified at the highest levels, something the brass had whispered about in the final days before the military was disbanded. He'd assumed it was just another contingency plan that would never be used. "When did this happen?" he asked the boys. 3 days ago, Tommy replied. "We hid in the ventilation system when the Galactic Soldiers came. They searched the house, took all of Papa's research, then burned everything. But they didn't find the recorder. Papa hid it in a place only we knew about." Jake stepped closer, his young face fierce with determination. "We want to hire you. We saved up credits from selling scrap metal. It's not much, but Papa said human soldiers never abandoned their own." Marcus looked at the small pile of credit chips the boy placed on a nearby crate. It might buy a decent meal and a night in a real bed, nothing more. But that wasn't the point. These kids had lost everything, and they were still willing to fight. That was the human spirit David Richardson had talked about. "I don't need your money," Marcus said, pocketing the recording device. "But I need to know everything your father told you about his research. Every detail, every name, every location." Tommy and Jake exchanged glances, and Marcus saw something pass between them. A decision made without words, the way siblings communicate when they've only had each other to rely on. "Papa said there was a resistance," Tommy began. "Other humans who remember what Earth was like. He said they were scattered across the galaxy, waiting for someone to give the signal." "What signal?" "Operation Starfall," Jake whispered. "Papa said it was a way to remind every human in the galaxy who they really were, but it needed someone with military training to activate it. Someone the Council couldn't control." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like his old combat pack. He'd thought his war was over when the military disbanded. He'd been wrong. The real war was just beginning, and it wouldn't be fought with ships and energy weapons. It would be fought with information, courage, and the one thing humans had that no other species understood: hope. "All right, boys," Marcus said, standing up straight for the first time in months. "Looks like you just hired yourself a Green Beret. But we're not doing this for revenge. We're doing this to make sure no other kids lose their fathers to alien justice." Outside, thunder rolled across the alien sky, and Marcus Chen began planning his return to war. The Green Beret, Story Part 2. The safe house Marcus had chosen was 3 levels underground, hidden beneath the ruins of an old mining facility that the Galactic Council had abandoned when they discovered the ore wasn't profitable enough. The boys had been there for 2 days now, and Marcus could see them slowly beginning to trust him. Tommy still kept watch while Jake slept, but the younger boy had started asking questions about Earth. Marcus was studying the data from David Richardson's recording when his old communication device crackled to life. He'd kept the military-grade encrypted transmitter hidden for months, never expecting to use it again. The voice that came through was one he hadn't heard in over a year. "Phoenix, this is Eagle. Are you receiving?" Marcus grabbed the transmitter, his heart racing. Eagle was Colonel Sarah Martinez, his former commanding officer. She'd been one of the few senior officers who'd openly opposed the military dissolution. "Eagle, this is Phoenix. I'm receiving you. Where are you transmitting from?" "Can't say over the comm, but I'm close. I've got news about Starfall. The package you recovered has information we've been looking for. How secure is your location?" Marcus looked at the boys who were listening with wide eyes. "Secure enough. 2 packages came with the delivery, if you understand my meaning." There was a long pause. "Understood. Those packages are the reason I'm here. Their father was working with us before he was eliminated. We need to extract all of you within 48 hours. Negative, Eagle. I'm not running anymore. The packages deserve better than a life in hiding." "Marcus." Sarah's voice took on the tone she'd used when they'd served together, the one that meant she was about to give him information that would change everything. "The Galactic Council isn't just eliminating human resistance. They're implementing something called the Pacification Protocol. Every human settlement will be subjected to genetic modification within the next 6 months. They're going to change us, make us docile like the Rigelians." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. The Rigelians had been a warrior species once, until the Galactic Council had helped them overcome their aggressive tendencies. Now they were barely capable of defending themselves from common criminals, let alone mounting any kind of resistance. "What's our play?" Marcus asked. Operation Starfall was designed as a communications network activation. "Your father," Sarah said, addressing the boys directly, "helped us identify every human settlement in the galaxy and establish dormant transmitters. When Starfall activates, every human community will receive the same message simultaneously." Tommy leaned closer to the communicator. "What message?" "The truth about Earth. About who we were before the Council took over. About what we're capable of when we work together. But more importantly, it includes technical specifications for building weapons and ships using materials the Council considers harmless." Marcus understood immediately. Dual-use technology. Things that look like farming equipment or mining tools but can be weaponized. Exactly. But here's the problem. The transmitter network needs 3 activation codes to function, and they have to be entered simultaneously from different locations. David had 1 code. I have the 2nd. The 3rd was held by Commander Jackson on Proxima Colony. Was held? Jackson was captured 2 weeks ago. The Galactic Soldiers are interrogating him. We estimate he'll break within days if he hasn't already. Marcus closed his eyes, running tactical scenarios in his head. Where's the third transmitter? Proxima Colony. Maximum security facility. 50 Galactic Soldiers, energy shields, the works. It's a suicide mission. Jake suddenly spoke up, his young voice cutting through the adult conversation. Papa left us something else. He said only to use it if everything else failed. Marcus and the boys had been through David's hidden materials twice, but Jake walked to his backpack and pulled out what looked like a simple toy soldier. When he twisted the head, a small compartment opened, revealing another data chip. Papa said this was his insurance policy, Jake said. He said it contained something that would make the Galactic Soldiers very unhappy. Marcus inserted the chip into his scanner. What he saw made him whistle low. Your father was a very clever man. This contains the personal communication logs of every Galactic Soldier commander for the past 5 years. Proof of war crimes, corruption, illegal experimentation on civilian populations. How does that help us? Tommy asked. Because, Marcus said, a plan forming in his mind. It means we don't have to break into their facility. We're going to make them come to us. Sarah's voice crackled through the communicator. Phoenix, what are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to remind the galaxy what happens when you threaten human children. Eagle, can you get me a clear broadcast channel to the Galactic Council? Marcus, that's insane. They'll send everything they have after you. Good, that means they won't be guarding Commander Jackson. Tommy. Jake, how would you boys like to learn about psychological warfare? Over the next 6 hours, Marcus worked with the boys to prepare what David Richardson would have called the ultimate insurance policy. They encoded the Galactic Soldier communication logs into a virus that would spread through the Galactic Communication Network automatically. Once released, every civilian population in Council space would know the truth about their protectors. But the virus was just the distraction. The real plan was simpler and far more dangerous. The Galactic Soldiers respond to threats with overwhelming force, Marcus explained to the boys as he checked his old military equipment. It's their standard doctrine. When they receive a credible threat to their security, they send everything they have. But won't that mean more soldiers coming after us? Tommy asked. Exactly. Which means fewer soldiers guarding Commander Jackson. Sarah's extraction team will have a much easier time getting him out while the Galactic Soldiers are busy hunting us. Jake looked worried. But what happens to us when they find us? Marcus knelt down to the boy's eye level. Jake, your father died because he believed humans deserved to be free. He believed it so much that he spent years gathering evidence to prove the Galactic Council was lying about everything. Are you willing to fight for that same freedom? Both boys nodded without hesitation. Then we're going to broadcast a message that will change everything. We're going to tell the galaxy that humanity is not extinct, not pacified, and definitely not afraid. We're going to remind them why humans were the first species to master interstellar travel, the first to explore unknown space, and the first to fight for the freedom of other species. Marcus activated his military transmitter, broadcasting on all council frequencies simultaneously. His message was simple, direct, and delivered in the tone he'd once used to address enemy forces. This is Marcus Chen, former Green Beret, Earth Special Forces. I have in my possession evidence of Galactic Soldier war crimes spanning 5 years. In 24 hours, this evidence will be broadcast on all civilian frequencies unless the following demands are met. Immediate cessation of the pacification protocol, release of all human prisoners, and restoration of human colonies to self-governance. He paused, looking at the boys who watched him with absolute trust. To every human listening to this transmission, remember who you are. Remember that your ancestors crossed impossible distances to touch the stars. Remember that humans don't surrender, don't submit, and don't abandon their own. The war for human freedom starts now. Marcus ended the transmission and turned to the boys. Now we wait for them to come. Outside, alien sirens began wailing across the colony. The Green Beret, Story, Part 3. The response came faster than Marcus had expected. Within 6 hours of his transmission, orbital sensors detected 12 Galactic Soldier ships entering the Kepler-7 system. Marcus watched the tactical display he'd jury-rigged from salvaged equipment, counting vessels and calculating response times. That's a lot of ships, Tommy observed, trying to keep the worry out of his voice. It's exactly what we wanted, Marcus replied. Every ship they send here is a ship that's not protecting Commander Jackson. But now comes the hard part. The boys had spent the time well, helping Marcus prepare the abandoned mining facility for what he privately expected to be his final battle. They'd rigged the tunnels with improvised explosives made from mining charges, set up communication relays, and prepared multiple escape routes. Jake had proven surprisingly good at electronics, while Tommy showed a natural talent for tactical thinking. Marcus's communicator crackled. "Phoenix, this is Eagle. The distraction is working. Proxima Colony is down to minimal security. We're going in for Jackson now." "Copy, Eagle. How long do you need?" 12 hours minimum." "Can you keep them busy that long?" Marcus looked around the facility they'd turned into a fortress. 12 hours against 50 Galactic Soldiers with superior weapons and armor. The smart play would be to surrender, but smart plays didn't win wars against oppression. "I'll give you 12 hours, Marcus promised. The first sign of the Galactic Soldier assault came from the boys, who'd positioned themselves at observation points throughout the complex. Jake's voice came through the comm system he'd helped Marcus install. "They're landing transport ships at all the main entrances. Looks like they're trying to surround the whole facility." "How many?" Marcus asked, checking his rifle for the 10th time. "I count 6 transports. Each one's carrying maybe 8 soldiers. 48 Galactic Soldiers." Marcus had faced worse odds during his military service, but never with 2 children depending on him for protection. He activated the facility's old mining announcement system, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Galactic Soldiers, this is Marcus Chen. I have explosive charges rigged throughout this facility. Any attempt to breach the perimeter will result in the destruction of the evidence you're here to recover. I'm willing to negotiate." The response came in the form of Galactic Soldier Commander Vex 9, whose voice carried the mechanical enhancement common to Thrakari officers. "Human Chen, you are ordered to surrender immediately. The Galactic Council's authority supersedes any claim you might have to the stolen materials." "Stolen materials?" Marcus laughed, making sure his amusement carried over the comm. "Commander, those materials document war crimes committed by your forces. The only theft here was committed by the Council when they decided humans didn't deserve freedom. Humans were offered integration into galactic civilization. Your species chose to resist beneficial modifications." "Beneficial modifications," Marcus repeated. "Is that what you call genetic manipulation designed to eliminate human independence?" "Commander, I've read your personal logs. I know about the experiments on Rigel 3. I know about the civilian executions on Tau Ceti. I know you personally ordered the elimination of human families who refused to surrender their children for educational enhancement." There was a long silence on the comm. Marcus had struck home. The Galactic Soldiers' greatest weakness was their belief in their own righteousness. They'd convinced themselves that everything they did was for the greater good of galactic civilization. "Human Chen, the Council's decisions are made for the benefit of all species. Individual desires must be subordinated to collective security." "Collective security," Marcus said. "Tell me, Commander, when your people were first contacted by the Council, how many Thrakari refused the modifications? How many had to be eliminated for the greater good?" Another silence. Marcus had done his homework during his military service. Every species in the Galactic Council had originally resisted integration. Every species had been systematically modified to eliminate aggressive or independent traits. The Council called it evolution. Marcus called it genocide. Tommy's voice crackled through the internal comm. "Marcus, they're moving. Small teams approaching from all directions." "Copy that. Execute Plan Alpha." Marcus had spent years studying Galactic Soldier tactics during his military service. They were efficient, methodical, and completely predictable. They always approached from multiple angles, used superior firepower to suppress defenders, then moved in with overwhelming force. The first mining charge detonated exactly when Marcus expected it to, collapsing the main entrance tunnel just as the first Galactic Soldier team attempted entry. The explosion sent shockwaves through the facility, and Marcus heard Tommy cheer over the comm. "Direct hit. The tunnel's completely blocked." "That's 1 entrance down, 5 to go," Marcus replied, moving to his next position. "Jake, what's the status on the secondary approaches?" "They're regrouping. Looks like they didn't expect resistance. That was the Galactic Soldiers' second weakness. They'd been fighting pacified species for so long that they'd forgotten what real warfare looked like. Humans had been the last species to resist Council integration, and the Council had made sure to eliminate all military records before disbanding human forces. The second wave came 20 minutes later, better coordinated and more cautious. Marcus watched through his scope as Thrakari soldiers advanced through the facility's outer perimeter, their energy weapons ready. These weren't the poorly trained garrison troops he'd expected. These were experienced combat veterans. Commander Vex 9, Marcus broadcast, "Your soldiers are well trained. They almost remind me of humans before the Council decided we were too dangerous to exist. Humans were offered the same opportunities as every species. Your aggression was incompatible with galactic peace." Aggression? Marcus lined up his first shot, targeting the soldier's weapon rather than the soldier himself. The energy rifle exploded in a shower of sparks, sending the Thrakari diving for cover. "Commander, aggression is what you call it when humans fight for the right to raise their own children. We call it love." Marcus moved immediately after the shot, using the tunnel system he'd memorized over months of living in the facility. The Galactic Soldiers would be tracking his position, but the old mining complex was a maze of interconnected passages and vertical shafts. Jake's voice came through the comm, excited, but controlled. "Marcus, they're setting up some kind of heavy weapon at the north entrance." "Plasma cannon," Marcus identified, recognizing the energy signature. "They're going to try to breach the main defensive position. Can they do that?" "Eventually. But we're not planning to hold this position forever. Tommy, are the relay transmitters ready?" "All set up and broadcasting." "Every human settlement in this sector is receiving our signal. That was the real purpose of this defense. Not to win a battle against superior forces, but to buy time for Operation Starfall to activate and to demonstrate to every human in the galaxy that resistance was possible." Marcus had spent hours recording messages that would broadcast automatically, regardless of what happened to him. The plasma cannon fired its first shot, and the facility shook like an earthquake. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling, and Marcus heard the boys coughing over the comm. "Everyone okay?" "We're fine," Tommy replied. "But they're going to break through soon. Then it's time for Phase 2. Boys, remember what we discussed. You stick to the extraction route no matter what happens. Sarah's people will be waiting at the rendezvous point." "What about you?" Jake asked, and Marcus could hear the fear in the young voice. Marcus checked his ammunition one more time. "I'm going to buy you the time you need to get clear. Then I'm going to remind these soldiers why the Council was so afraid of human military units." "Marcus," Tommy said, "Papa always told us that humans never abandon their own. Your father was a wise man. But sometimes the best way to protect your own is to make sure the enemy never forgets the price of threatening them." The plasma cannon fired again, and this time Marcus heard the sound of metal giving way. They were through the outer defenses. In minutes, the facility would be swarming with Galactic Soldiers. Marcus activated his final transmission, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Marcus Chen to all human forces, active and retired anywhere in the galaxy. Today we reminded the Council that humanity is not extinct. Today we proved that humans will fight for freedom even when victory seems impossible. To every human listening, remember this moment. Remember that 2 children had the courage to seek justice for their father. Remember that humans don't surrender." The facility's main door exploded inward, and Marcus could hear Galactic Soldier combat boots echoing through the tunnels. "Boys, execute extraction now. That's an order." Marcus Chen, former Green Beret, picked up his rifle and walked toward the sound of enemy forces. Behind him, 2 young voices whispered through the comm system. "Thank you, Marcus. Make them pay." The Green Beret Story. Part 4 Commander Vex 9 led his assault team through the shattered remains of the mining facility's main entrance, his enhanced tactical sensors scanning for the human terrorist who had caused so much trouble. 3 of his soldiers were injured, 2 transport ships damaged, and his reputation with the Council was taking serious damage. All because of 1 discharged human soldier and 2 civilian children. "Sensor sweep complete, Commander," reported Sergeant Cole 7. "The human is alone in the central chamber. No sign of the juveniles." Vex 9 felt something that might have been relief if his species hadn't had that emotion surgically removed generations ago. Killing human children was problematic from a political standpoint, even for the Council. Adult human terrorists were a different matter entirely. Surround the chamber. Use stunning weapons only. The Council wants this one alive for interrogation. As his troops moved into position, Vex 9 activated his external speakers. "Human Chen, you are surrounded. Surrender immediately, and you will be treated according to galactic law. The response came from the chamber ahead, calm and steady. Commander, I've been thinking about galactic law. Specifically, I've been wondering how many laws you've broken in the last 5 years. The Council's authority supersedes local legal frameworks. Our actions serve the greater good. The greater good, Marcus repeated. Commander, did you know that humans have a saying? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Do you know what hell is, Commander? X9 consulted his cultural database. The human concept of hell appeared to be a metaphorical location representing ultimate punishment for moral failure. Your primitive religious concepts are irrelevant to current circumstances. Oh, but they're very relevant. You see, Commander, I've been to hell. I've seen what happens when good intentions are used to justify evil actions. And I've learned that sometimes the only way to stop evil is to become something even more frightening. Vex 9 signaled his troops to advance. Through his tactical display, he could see Marcus Chen standing in the center of the chamber, his primitive kinetic weapon lowered, hands visible. The human appeared to be surrendering. That's a wise decision, Human Chen. The explosion came from directly beneath Vex 9's feet. Marcus had positioned mining charges throughout the chamber, turning the entire area into a carefully orchestrated trap. The blast sent the commander flying backward, his armor cracked, his tactical system sparking. But Marcus Chen was no longer in the chamber. Alpha Team, report. Vex 9 commanded, struggling to his feet. Alpha Team is down, sir. Beta Team, moving to flank position. Gamma Team, no response from our position. Through his damaged sensors, Vex 9 realized what had happened. The human hadn't been surrendering. He'd been buying time to move through the facility's ventilation system, positioning himself to attack each squad individually. Classic guerrilla tactics. The kind of warfare that had made human military units so problematic during the initial contact period. All units, converge on my position. Do not pursue individually. But Marcus was already moving. Through the maze of mining tunnels, he picked off Galactic Soldiers one by one, using their own tactical doctrine against them. They moved in predictable patterns, relied too heavily on their technological advantages, and had forgotten the most basic rule of combat. Never underestimate a desperate enemy. Jake's voice crackled through Marcus's earpiece. Marcus, we're at the extraction point. Sarah's people are here. Good, stay with them and get off-world. What about you? Marcus smiled grimly as he watched another squad of Galactic Soldiers walk into his crosshairs. I'm having a conversation with Commander Vex 9 about the price of murdering human families. Tommy's voice joined the conversation. Marcus, we're not leaving without you. Boys, listen to me very carefully. Your father died to give you information that can save every human in the galaxy. Sarah needs that information to complete Operation Starfall. You have a choice. You can stay here and watch me die, or you can make sure your father's sacrifice means something. There was a long silence on the comm. Finally, Tommy spoke, his voice thick with emotion. We'll make it mean something. We promise. I know you will. Now go. Marcus cut the communication link and focused on the task at hand. Through his scope, he could see Vex 9 reorganizing his forces, bringing them together in a defensive formation. The commander was learning, adapting to human tactics. That was good. It meant he was taking the threat seriously. Marcus activated the facility's public address system one more time. Commander Vex 9, I want to tell you a story. It's about a human father who loved his children enough to die for them. His name was David Richardson, and your soldiers murdered him for the crime of wanting to raise his boys as free human beings. Vex 9's response came immediately. David Richardson was a terrorist who threatened galactic security. David Richardson was a supply sergeant who kept records. He documented what your people did to human families who refused genetic modification. He recorded the executions, the disappearances, the children taken from their parents for educational enhancement. Marcus moved through the tunnels as he spoke, positioning himself for his final assault. The Galactic Soldiers were good, but they were fighting in an environment he'd had months to prepare. Every tunnel, every chamber, every ventilation shaft was a weapon in his hands. Commander, do you have children? The question seemed to catch Vex 9 off guard. Thrakari reproduction is managed by the state for optimal genetic outcomes, so that's a no. You've never held your own child. Never read them stories about your homeworld, never worried about their future. That's the difference between us, Commander. Human parents will do anything to protect their children. Anything at all. Marcus triggered the first of his remaining mining charges, collapsing a section of tunnel between two Galactic Soldier squads. Now they were split, unable to coordinate effectively. You see, Commander, the Council made a fundamental error when they decided to eliminate human independence. They assumed that humans would react logically to superior force. But humans aren't logical. We're protective, and when you threaten our children, logic goes out the window. Marcus dropped down through a ventilation shaft directly behind the first squad. His assault rifle spoke once, twice, 3 times. Energy weapons flew from alien hands as kinetic rounds found their mark. The soldiers weren't dead, but they were disarmed and demoralized. Alpha Squad, report. Alpha Squad is neutralized, sir. Weapons destroyed, soldiers injured but stable. Marcus was already moving to his next position. Here's what's going to happen, Commander. You're going to withdraw your forces from this facility. You're going to report to the Council that Human Chen died in the explosion, and you're going to recommend that the pacification protocol be suspended pending further review. That is impossible. The Council's directives are not subject to field modification. Then here's your alternative. Marcus triggered another mining charge, this one designed to send a specific message. The explosion carved the words, "Remember David," into the facility's main wall in letters 10 feet high. Every human settlement in the galaxy has received the evidence David Richardson died to protect. They know about the war crimes, the illegal executions, the children stolen from their families. The Council can choose to end this quietly, or they can try to pacify 30 million angry humans across 50 star systems. Through his tactical sensors, Vex 9 could see his remaining forces. 12 soldiers, half of them wounded, trapped in a facility controlled by a single human terrorist. The situation was becoming impossible to explain to his superiors. Human Chen, what do you want? I want David Richardson's boys to grow up free. I want every human child in the galaxy to know where they came from. I want the Council to remember that humans didn't ask to be modified, didn't ask to be pacified, and sure as hell didn't ask to be murdered for wanting to stay human. Marcus appeared at the end of the corridor, where Vex 9 waited with his remaining soldiers. His rifle was lowered, but his eyes held something that made the commander's tactical systems register extreme danger. Most of all, Commander, I want you to take a message back to the Council. Tell them that humanity just declared war. The facility's final mining charge detonated, sealing the tunnels and leaving only one exit. As the dust settled, Vex 9 realized that Human Chen had vanished once again, leaving only the echo of his words and the growing certainty that the Council's plans for human pacification had just become much more complicated. The Green Beret Story. Part 5. 3 days later, Tommy and Jake Richardson stood on the bridge of the resistance ship Free Earth, watching as Operation Starfall finally activated across the galaxy. The ship's communication array lit up with incoming signals from human colonies that hadn't been heard from in years, all responding to the same message that David Richardson had died to protect. 47 colonies reporting in, announced Colonel Sarah Martinez, studying the tactical display. Every single one confirms receipt of the Starfall data package. They're organizing local defense forces and establishing communication networks. Tommy felt a mixture of pride and sadness as he watched the galaxy-wide awakening that his father had made possible. Jake stood beside him, clutching the small recording device that had started everything. "Any word from Marcus?" Jake asked quietly. Sarah shook her head. The Galactic Soldiers withdrew from Kepler-7 6 hours after the facility explosion. No survivors reported, but she paused, checking her datapad. "We're getting reports of Galactic Soldier convoys being ambushed across 3 star systems. Someone's using classic human military tactics." Tommy smiled for the first time in days. "He's alive. More than alive," Sarah replied. "He's teaching the galaxy what happens when you threaten human children. But we've got bigger problems now. The Council has declared martial law in all human territories. They're mobilizing everything they have." Commander Jackson, recently rescued from the Proxima Colony detention facility, limped onto the bridge, his face showing the effects of Galactic Soldier interrogation techniques. "How many ships do they have?" 237 capital ships, maybe 300 smaller vessels, Sarah reported. "Against what?" 30 million humans spread across 50 colonies with no military infrastructure and farming equipment that can be converted to weapons if we're lucky. Jake looked up from the recording device. Papa said the Council's biggest weakness was that they forgot what humans were like before the modifications. He said they never understood why Earth's military was so effective. What do you mean? Sarah asked. Tommy answered for his brother. Papa said other species fight for territory, resources, political control. Humans fight for ideas. And when humans fight for the idea that their children should be free, there's no force in the galaxy that can stop them. As if summoned by the boy's words, the ship's communication system crackled to life. Marcus Chen's voice came through the speakers, transmitted from somewhere in the Kepler system. Free Earth, this is Phoenix. I'm broadcasting from a captured Galactic Soldier transport. I've got 17 former prisoners aboard, all human military veterans who've been in detention for the past 2 years. Sarah grabbed the communicator. Phoenix, we thought you were dead. How did you? Commander Vex 9 made a mistake. He left his prisoners in a minimum security facility while he chased me around that mining complex. Turns out when you tell a Thrakari commander that humanity just declared war, he takes it seriously enough to consolidate his forces. Marcus, Jake called out. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, kid. I'm angry, I'm armed, and I've got friends who remember how to fight. But more importantly, I've been monitoring galactic communications. Do you know what's happening out there? Sarah consulted her displays. Martial law, fleet mobilization, the usual Council response to resistance. Wrong, what's happening is panic. The Council just realized they've been fighting the wrong war for the past 5 years. They thought they were dealing with scattered human terrorists. Now they know they're facing something they eliminated from every other species in the galaxy, which is military culture. You see, when the Council pacified other species, they were dealing with civilians who happened to have advanced technology, but humans militarized before we reached the stars. War is part of our cultural DNA, and they can't modify that without killing everything that makes us human. Through the ship's sensors, Tommy could see ships beginning to gather in nearby space. Not Council ships, but converted civilian vessels flying improvised human flags. Farmers, miners, traders, all responding to the call that had gone out with Operation Starfall. Sarah, Marcus continued, what's the current count on human responses to Starfall? 47 colonies, maybe 300 ships of various types. Try again. I'm looking at real-time data from the Resistance Network. 63 colonies have gone active. 412 ships have joined local defense fleets. Every human settlement with more than 1,000 people has organized a militia. And here's the interesting part. They're not waiting for orders from Earth or the Resistance leadership. Sarah understood immediately. Decentralized command structure. The Council can't cut off our head because we don't have one. Exactly. Your father was a genius, Marcus said, addressing the boys. He didn't just preserve information about human military capabilities. He preserved the human military mindset. Every family that received the Starfall data didn't just get technical specifications for weapons. They got tactical manuals, leadership principles, and most importantly, the understanding that humans fight differently than every other species in the galaxy. The ship's tactical officer, a young woman named Lisa Park, looked up from her station. Colonel, I'm detecting massive fleet movements in Council space. Looks like they're pulling ships from border patrols to concentrate forces for human suppression. How many ships total? Sarah asked. 347 capital ships confirmed, plus support vessels. It's the largest fleet mobilization in Council history. Tommy felt his heart sink. Hundreds of alien warships against converted civilian craft and improvised militias. It seemed hopeless. But Marcus's voice came through the communicator again, carrying something that might have been amusement. Boys, remember what your father taught you about asymmetric warfare? Fight smart, not fair, Jake replied immediately. That's right. And here's what the Council doesn't understand about humans. We've been fighting asymmetric wars for thousands of years. We know how to turn disadvantages into advantages. Sarah leaned forward. What are you thinking, Marcus? I'm thinking the Council just made their biggest mistake. They're committing their entire fleet to human space, leaving their own territories virtually undefended. And thanks to David Richardson's intelligence network, we know exactly where their most vulnerable targets are. The tactical display updated as new information flowed in from across the galaxy. Tommy watched as dozens of red dots appeared, representing Council administrative centers, supply depots, and command facilities. The Galactic Council has spent decades teaching other species to be passive, dependent on Council protection, Marcus explained. Their own worlds can't defend themselves. While they're hunting human fighters in the outer colonies, human strike teams can be hitting their infrastructure in the core systems. Jake looked at the display, his young mind grasping the tactical situation. Like what Papa used to say about bullies. They're tough when they think you can't fight back, but when you hit them where they don't expect it, they fold, Tommy finished. Because they're not really strong, they just convince everyone they are. Sarah was already working on the implications. If we can coordinate simultaneous strikes on key council facilities while their fleet is committed to human space, we don't just resist pacification, Marcus concluded. We liberate every species they've been oppressing for the past century. The communication board lit up as human settlements across the galaxy began reporting in. Not just defensive preparations now, but offensive capabilities. Converted mining ships armed with fusion cutters, agricultural vessels carrying improvised missiles, exploration craft equipped for deep space raids. Tommy watched the display and thought about his father, who had believed so strongly in human freedom that he died to protect the information that made this moment possible. David Richardson had wanted his sons to grow up free, but he'd given them something more valuable than freedom. He'd given them the chance to free everyone. Marcus, Tommy said into the communicator. What are your orders? Marcus's laugh carried across the void between ships. Kid, I'm not giving orders. That's the beauty of the human resistance. Every ship, every colony, every family gets to choose how they want to fight. But if you're asking for suggestions, we're asking. Then I suggest we remind the galaxy what humans were like before the council decided we needed to be fixed. I suggest we show them what happens when a species that conquered distance, time, and death itself gets really truly angry. The display showed more ships arriving every hour, more colonies going active, more human voices joining the growing chorus of resistance. Tommy realized he was watching the birth of something the galaxy had never seen before. A species-wide rebellion motivated not by conquest or territory, but by the simple idea that children should grow up free. Sarah, Marcus added, there's one more thing. The Council's fleet is massive, but it has a critical weakness. Every alien species serving in their forces has been genetically modified for obedience. They're brave, skilled, and completely unable to adapt when their orders don't match reality. And humans? Humans have been disobeying stupid orders since we first picked up sticks and decided to hunt creatures 10 times our size. It's what we do. The Green Beret Story. Part 6. The Council Chamber on Galaxia Prime had not seen this level of emergency activity in over 2 centuries. High Chancellor Zor Prime, a Vegan whose species had been among the first to accept Council modifications, stood before the massive tactical display showing human fleet movements across the galaxy. What he saw defied everything the Council understood about pacified species. Explain to me, Zor Prime said to the assembled military commanders, how a species with no official military, no manufacturing base, and no central government has managed to field over 600 armed vessels in less than a week. Commander Vex 9, still bearing the scars of his encounter with Marcus Chen, stepped forward. Chancellor, our analysis suggests that humans never fully accepted the pacification process. They maintained hidden knowledge of military tactics, weapon construction, and most problematically, the psychological framework necessary for sustained resistance. That's impossible. Our modification protocols are comprehensive. Every species that has undergone the process becomes incapable of large-scale violent resistance. Yes, Chancellor. Every species except humans. Admiral Kess 4, Supreme Commander of Council Forces, activated her display. The human resistance appears to be operating on principles we eliminated from galactic warfare centuries ago. They're using their civilian population as a military asset, converting non-military infrastructure for combat purposes, and employing decentralized command structures that make our standard suppression tactics ineffective. Zor Prime studied the tactical readouts. Human forces weren't concentrated in defensive positions as expected. Instead, they were scattered across hundreds of systems, launching coordinated raids on Council infrastructure while maintaining no fixed bases that could be targeted. What is the current status of our suppression fleet? 347 capital ships deployed across human space, engaged in search and destroy operations. However, the humans are avoiding direct engagement. They strike our supply convoys, hit isolated facilities, then disappear before our forces can respond. Casualty reports? Admiral Kess 4's mandibles clicked nervously. 7 ships destroyed, 23 damaged, over 400 personnel casualties. Human losses are minimal. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Council forces, with their superior technology and overwhelming numbers, were being systematically dismantled by converted civilian craft operated by farmers, miners, and merchants. There's more. Chancellor, Commander Vex 9 continued, the humans have begun broadcasting propaganda to other species throughout Council space. They're distributing evidence of our necessary enforcement actions and claiming that every species has the right to refuse modification. Zor Prime felt something that his genetically modified nervous system could barely process: genuine fear. The stability of the Galactic Council depended on the universal acceptance that modification was beneficial, necessary, and permanent. If other species began to question that fundamental truth, show me the propaganda. The display changed to show a human face that Vex 9 recognized immediately. Marcus Chen, supposedly dead, broadcasting from somewhere in Council space. People of the galaxy, Marcus said, his voice carrying an intensity that made several Council members step backward. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm a human soldier, and I'm here to tell you something your governments don't want you to know. You had a choice. The recording continued, showing documentation of Council modification procedures, before and after psychological profiles of modified species, and most damning of all, records of resistance movements that had been eliminated during the pacification process. Every species currently under Council control originally fought for their independence. The Rigelians were warriors who conquered 3 star systems before the Council helped them become peaceful. The Centaurians built the first faster-than-light communications network because they refused to accept the limitations of distance. Your ancestors were explorers, warriors, builders, dreamers. Zor Prime watched in growing horror as Marcus Chen displayed historical records that the Council had spent centuries suppressing. The modifications you've accepted weren't evolution. They were surgical removal of everything that made your species unique, independent, capable of growth. Turn it off, Zor Prime commanded. Chancellor, the broadcast is being transmitted on over 2,000 frequencies simultaneously. Our attempts to block it have been unsuccessful. The humans appear to have infiltrated our communication networks. The recording continued. But here's what the Council doesn't want you to know. The modifications can be reversed. Human medical technology has developed treatments that can restore original neural pathways, reverse genetic alterations, and most importantly, return the capacity for independent thought. Several Council members turned to look at Zor Prime, their faces showing the first stirrings of something that had been eliminated from their psychology generations ago. Doubt. Is this true? Asked Counselor Vel 8, representing the Andromedan Collective. Can the modifications be reversed? The human claims are theoretically possible, admitted the Council's chief scientist. However, the process would be extremely dangerous and could result in complete psychological breakdown. Or, Marcus Chen's voice continued from the display, it could result in your people remembering who they used to be. The choice is yours. Admiral Kess 4 updated her tactical display.
Chancellor, we're receiving reports of civil unrest on 17 Council worlds.
Several Rigelian communities are openly questioning the benefits of pacification. The Centaurian communication guilds have begun broadcasting unauthorized historical documentaries. Zor Prime realized that the human resistance had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They'd made pacified species angry, not just dissatisfied or confused, but genuinely angry at what had been done to them. What are our options? Military suppression of the affected worlds, immediate implementation of enhanced modification protocols, and elimination of the human terrorist networks broadcasting the propaganda. Time frame? With our current fleet deployment in human space, we estimate 6 months to suppress the civil unrest and eliminate the human resistance. Unacceptable. Recall half the suppression fleet immediately. Focus on containing the rebellion on Council worlds. Chancellor, Commander Vex 9 interrupted, that will allow the human resistance to consolidate their forces. Commander, the human resistance is a minor irritant compared to the possibility of our own citizens demanding independence. If the other species begin to remember what they were like before modification, Zor Prime didn't finish the sentence. The implications were clear to everyone in the chamber. The Galactic Council's authority rested on the willing submission of modified species, who believed they'd chosen their current state freely. If that belief collapsed, the Council would face rebellion on every world they controlled. The tactical display updated again, showing new developments across Council space. On Rigel 2, former warriors were organizing training camps, teaching their children traditional combat techniques they'd thought were lost forever. On Centauri 7, engineers were designing communication systems that the Council couldn't monitor or control. On dozens of worlds, citizens were asking questions that they'd been genetically programmed not to ask. "There's one more thing, Chancellor," Admiral Kes-4 said quietly. "We've intercepted communications suggesting that the humans have made contact with unmodified species beyond Council space. The Korvaxi Empire, the Zephyrian free worlds, even the nomadic fleets." Zor Prime understood immediately. The human resistance wasn't just fighting for their own freedom. They were building an alliance of every species that had refused Council modification, every government that had maintained their independence, every culture that had kept their original nature intact. How many ships could such an alliance field? Conservative estimate? 3,000 vessels. Aggressive estimate? 10,000. The numbers were staggering. The Council's entire military couldn't face such a force, especially with their own citizens in open rebellion and their fleet scattered across human space chasing ghosts. As if responding to his thoughts, the communication system activated again. This time the voice belonged to Tommy Richardson, though Zor Prime didn't recognize the young human. "Chancellor Zor Prime, my name is Tommy Richardson. My father was David Richardson, a human citizen you had murdered for wanting to raise his children free. I'm 12 years old, and I'm broadcasting this message from a ship full of people who remember what freedom feels like." The boy's voice carried a quality that made Zor Prime's enhanced nervous system register extreme threat levels. "You want to know why humans are different from the other species you've modified? It's because we never forgot that freedom isn't something you earn or deserve. It's something you take. And we're going to take it for every species in the galaxy, whether they ask for it or not." Zor Prime realized that the Council faced something they'd never encountered before. A species that fought not for survival, territory or resources, but for abstract principles like freedom and justice. It was the most dangerous kind of enemy imaginable. "Chancellor," Admiral Kes-4 said, "we need a decision on fleet deployment." Zor Prime looked at the tactical display one more time, seeing the Green Beret story. Part 7, 6 months after Operation Starfall. Tommy and Jake Richardson stood on the observation deck of the battleship David's Legacy, watching the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for what would become known as the Battle of Galaxia Prime. Around them, ships from dozens of species filled the void, united under improvised flags that carried the symbols of freedom rather than conquest. Marcus Chen approached from behind, his former Green Beret uniform replaced by the simple clothes of a civilian. The war had changed him, softened some of the harder edges while strengthening his resolve. In his hands he carried the original recording device that had started everything. "Your father would be proud," Marcus said, handing the device to Tommy. "Every human ship in this fleet carries a copy of his research. Every free world in the galaxy knows his name." Jake looked out at the assembled forces, converted human civilian ships fighting alongside Korvaxi battlecruisers, Rigelian warrior craft that their builders had thought themselves incapable of creating, and Centaurian communication vessels that had become the fleet's coordination backbone. "How many ships total?" 12,437 vessels, replied Admiral Sarah Martinez, joining them at the viewport, representing 47 species and over 300 worlds. It's the first truly galactic alliance in recorded history. Tommy activated the device, watching his father's image appear one more time. David Richardson looked tired but determined, a man who'd known he was going to die but had chosen to fight anyway. Papa said the Council's biggest weakness was that they made the galaxy afraid to remember what they used to be. He said if humans could remind them, everything would change. Everything has changed, Marcus confirmed. The Council's fleet is down to maybe 800 ships. Half their member worlds are in open rebellion. The modification centers have been shut down on 60% of Council territories. Sarah nodded toward the tactical display. Intelligence reports indicate Chancellor Zor Prime has agreed to negotiate. After 6 months of losing every engagement, they're finally ready to listen. What terms are we offering? Jake asked. Complete reversal of all genetic and psychological modifications for any species that chooses it. Dissolution of the Galactic Council's military authority. Establishment of a new interspecies government based on voluntary association, rather than forced compliance. And most importantly, a universal declaration that no species has the right to modify another without explicit consent. Marcus smiled. In other words, we're offering them the chance to surrender before we remind them what humans are like when we stop holding back. Through the viewport, they could see the first negotiation shuttles launching toward the Council flagship. Aboard those shuttles were representatives from every species the Council had modified, including several whose existence had been hidden for generations. The thalassans, aquatic beings whose underwater cities had been thought destroyed. The crystalline collective, silicon-based life forms who'd been dismissed as unintelligent minerals. Even the mysterious energy dancers, beings of pure thought who'd been declared extinct after refusing Council contact. Tommy, Jake, Sarah said, the Council has specifically requested that you participate in the negotiations. They want to meet the children who started a galactic revolution. Tommy looked at his younger brother, seeing the same mixture of nervousness and determination that had carried them through the past months. What do we say to them? Marcus knelt down to their eye level. You tell them the truth. You tell them about a father who loved his children enough to die for their freedom. You tell them about humans who would rather fight impossible odds than accept slavery. And you tell them that this is what happens when you threaten human children. The boys exchanged glances, then nodded together. They'd learned a lot about courage in the past 6 months, watching human civilians transform themselves into warriors, seeing pacified species remember their warrior heritage, witnessing the birth of hope in places where it had been extinct for generations. As their shuttle approached the Council flagship, Tommy looked out at the massive alien vessel that had once represented absolute authority over billions of lives. Now it looked small and isolated, surrounded by the ships of species it had tried to control. Jake, Tommy said quietly, do you think Papa knew this would happen? Jake considered the question seriously. I think Papa knew that humans don't give up. He knew that if we could just remind the galaxy what freedom looked like, everything else would follow. The shuttle docked with the Council flagship, and the boys found themselves walking through corridors that had been designed to intimidate anyone who entered. The Council chamber itself was a vast space filled with representatives of species they'd only seen in their father's research files. Chancellor Zor Prime stood in the center, his enhanced features showing signs of stress that his genetic modifications couldn't completely suppress. Around him, the remaining Council members watched nervously as the human children who'd brought down their government approached. Tommy and Jake Richardson, Zor Prime said, his voice carrying none of its former authority. You are younger than I expected. We're old enough to know the difference between right and wrong, Tommy replied simply. Papa taught us that. Your father caused considerable disruption to galactic stability. Jake stepped forward, his voice clear and steady. Papa didn't cause anything. He just told the truth about what you did to people who trusted you. The Chancellor looked around the chamber, seeing representatives from species that had been thought pacified beyond any possibility of resistance. Rigelians who'd rediscovered their warrior traditions, Centaurians who'd rebuilt their communication networks, Andromedans who'd rejected the collective consciousness imposed on them generations ago. What do you want? Zor Prime asked finally. Tommy thought about the question, remembering everything his father had taught them about human values. We want every child in the galaxy to grow up knowing where they came from. We want parents to be able to raise their children without fear. We want species to choose their own destiny instead of having it chosen for them. And if the Council agrees to these terms, then humans will help rebuild what you destroyed, Jake answered. Papa always said humans were good at fixing things that were broken. Marcus Chen's voice came through the chamber's communication system. Chancellor, the human fleet is standing down and moving to support positions. We're not here to conquer or destroy. We're here to liberate. Zor Prime looked at the tactical display showing the massive Allied fleet. Every ship represented a species that had chosen freedom over security, independence over stability. The Council's grand vision of galactic unity through modification had collapsed, replaced by something messier, but infinitely more alive. The modifications, Zor Prime said finally. Reversing them will be dangerous. Many individuals may not survive the process. That's their choice to make, Tommy said. Papa always said the most dangerous thing about the council wasn't what you did to people's bodies. It was that you took away their right to choose. Over the following weeks, the negotiations resulted in the complete transformation of galactic civilization. The Galactic Council was dissolved and replaced with the Free Worlds Alliance, a voluntary association of species dedicated to mutual aid and protection. The modification centers were converted to medical facilities offering reversal treatments to anyone who chose them. Some species chose to keep their modifications, finding that they'd grown to appreciate their enhanced abilities. Others underwent partial reversal, keeping beneficial changes while regaining their original psychological independence. Many chose complete restoration to their pre-modification state. Humans found themselves in an unexpected role, teachers and advisors helping other species rediscover military traditions they'd thought lost forever. Human veterans like Marcus Chen were welcomed on worlds that had once been forbidden to them, sharing knowledge of tactics, strategy, and most importantly, the psychological strength necessary to defend freedom. Tommy and Jake Richardson returned to their home world, but not to the life they'd known before. They'd become symbols of something larger than themselves, the idea that children deserved to inherit the freedom their parents had fought to protect. Schools across human space began teaching the Richardson principles, the importance of keeping records, the courage to resist injustice, and the understanding that freedom must be earned by every generation. Marcus Chen never returned to military service, but he did return to teaching. On dozens of worlds, children gathered to hear stories about Earth, about the species that had crossed impossible distances to touch the stars, and about the day two young boys decided to hire a Green Beret to seek justice for their father. The galaxy had learned something that the Council's modifications had tried to eliminate, that freedom wasn't a privilege to be granted by superior authority, but a birthright to be defended by anyone brave enough to fight for it. And in the end, that made all the difference years later. When historians tried to understand how a few hundred human ships had defeated the largest military force in galactic history, they would point to technology, tactics, and alliances. But Tommy Richardson, now a grown man with children of his own, would